Beneath the carefully curated image of the Dupree family, a secret so devastating has begun to surface, one capable of shattering every relationship tied to their name. The truth didn't break quietly, it erupted through Leslie's trembling confession, detonating in Anita's world like a buried explosive finally triggered. What seemed like a simple whisper of suspicion spiraled into a revelation far more disturbing. Vernon and Sharon had crossed a line that could never be undone, leaving behind a hidden child that rewrites every bond, every promise, every sacrifice. In the instant the truth surfaced, the family's foundation splintered, and the woman who believed she understood her life was thrust into a storm of betrayal she never saw coming. Now, with emotions spiraling out of control and long-buried tensions awakening in the shadows, the question is no longer how the secret stayed hidden, but what its exposure will ignite. Anita had always believed that the walls of her home were strong enough to contain whatever storms life brought. She had faced political attacks, financial uncertainty, and the quiet loneliness that came from being married to a man whose ambitions consumed him. But nothing in her life prepared her for the moment Leslie revealed the truth, an unbearable, shattering truth that cut through her defenses with the precision of a knife. For a few seconds, Anita's mind refused to process the words. Her vision blurred, her breathing faltered, and the steady world she had crafted around herself began to tilt in a sickening spiral. The idea that Vernon could betray her was painful enough, but the existence of a child, an entire human life born from lies, was a revelation that broke something fundamental inside her. Her thoughts raced uncontrollably, jumping between scattered memories that no longer aligned with the narrative she had believed. She saw, with new clarity, every unexplained absence, every muted phone call, every moment Vernon returned home with an expression too guarded to be honest. The reality crashed over her in a wave so powerful she felt physically struck. The betrayal was not a single wound but a series of fractures spreading rapidly through her entire identity. The years she had devoted to building a stable, respectable family now felt like a cruel illusion. Her marriage had been a partnership in name only, her sacrifices had been taken for granted, her trust exploited. The image of Vernon as a pillar of strength dissolved, replaced by a man driven by impulses he had concealed behind polished speeches and carefully crafted appearances. Leslie stood frozen as she watched Anita unravel. She had expected anger, tears, disbelief, but not the visceral collapse unfolding before her. Leslie had uncovered the truth by accident, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations, unexpected documents, and hidden emotional tensions. At first, she thought revealing it was the only way to protect Anita from further humiliation. But now, watching the damage she had inflicted, she wondered whether she had acted out of concern or out of her own unresolved resentment toward Vernon. Leslie felt her own conscience tightening, whispering that she might have crossed a line. She had always seen herself as someone who fought for what was right, yet the situation now seemed far more tangled. The truth did not simply free people, sometimes it destroyed them. And as Anita's composure slipped into panic, Leslie felt the heavy weight of responsibility pressing against her chest. She had been the catalyst, the spark that ignited a fire she no longer knew how to control. Vernon, unaware that the truth had already surfaced, felt an unusual sense of dread gnawing at him. His instincts, honed from years of navigating political maneuvering and public scrutiny, told him something was slipping beyond his reach. He sensed distance in Anita that morning, sensed a strange tightness in her posture, but he dismissed it as stress. What he did not expect was the collapse of the secret he had guarded more fiercely than anything in his life. The child he shared with Sharon had been born from a moment of weakness, then complicated by guilt, then locked away in a compartment of his mind that he never allowed himself to open. Sharon had once represented escape, someone who saw through the exhaustion he hid and offered him a version of himself untethered from responsibility. But what started as escape became entanglement, and what became entanglement turned into a consequence too enormous to erase. The child was innocent. Vernon knew that. But the scandal was not. The revelation would tear his family apart, destroy his reputation, and shatter the trust of the woman who had supported him through every challenge. Sharon, meanwhile, lived under the constant strain of secrecy. She had convinced herself that keeping the truth hidden was necessary, not for her sake, but for the child who had no place in the world Vernon occupied. She knew the consequences of exposure better than anyone. Her career, her safety, and her dignity were all at stake. Yet the lie had become increasingly heavy, stretching her relationship with Vernon to its limits. She could feel him slipping away, retreating into a fear she could not reach or soothe. Every day she wondered whether the truth would surface not through her actions but through the world's relentless ability to uncover what people tried to bury. When Vernon finally learned that Leslie had confronted Anita, the panic that flooded him was unlike anything he had ever experienced. His chest tightened, his heartbeat thundered, and the room around him seemed to shrink. He imagined Anita's face contorted in disbelief and pain. He imagined her realizing that the speeches he gave about loyalty and family were nothing but hollow gestures. The thought that he had inflicted such suffering on her made something inside him recoil, but it also unleashed a darker instinct, the instinct to regain control at any cost. His thoughts spiraled toward damage control. He considered confronting Leslie, reasoning with her, intimidating her, silencing her. Every option felt like both a solution and a risk. The anger simmering inside him surged when he pictured Leslie stepping into a role she had no right to take, exposing something she could never understand. From his perspective, she had overstepped, inserting herself into a crisis that belonged to the family alone. The betrayal he felt from her revelation morphed into rage that clouded his judgment and drove him toward decisions he would later regret. Anita's reaction grew more volatile as the hours passed. The initial shock gave way to an all-consuming fury, raw, primal, and uncontrollable. She paced through the house, unable to find stability in any room. Everything felt tainted. The furniture they had chosen together, the photographs lining the walls, the polished floors she had once taken pride in, all of it felt like artifacts of a life that no longer existed. She wanted to scream, to break something, to purge the pain through physical force, yet she remained trapped inside her own spiraling thoughts. Her mind replayed scenes from the past with painful clarity, the early years when she and Vernon were inseparable, the evenings spent supporting his political campaigns, the burdens she silently carried while he pursued a public identity built on honor. She began to question whether any moment of her marriage had been real, or whether she had been living beside a stranger for decades. The thought hollowed her out, leaving her trembling with hurt that felt bottomless. Leslie could see the storm building inside Anita and felt increasingly powerless to help. She had delivered the truth but had no idea how to mend the devastation it caused. The guilt tightened around her like a chain. Every time she tried to approach Anita, she hesitated, unsure whether her presence would comfort or inflame. The conflict inside her grew heavier. She wanted to protect Anita from Vernon's deception, yet she had also become the instrument of Anita's suffering. As evening approached, the house felt charged with an energy that threatened to explode. Anita retreated to the farthest room, unable to face the possibility of talking to Vernon when he returned. Vernon paced in his car for 20 minutes before entering the house, knowing the confrontation awaiting him would be catastrophic. Sharon sat in her apartment, clutching her phone, waiting for news she feared would ruin everything. Leslie remained caught in the crossfire, unsure whether she should stay or go, whether her presence would offer support or deepen the emotional wounds. The Dupree family reached a breaking point that night, a point from which none of them could return unchanged. The truth had not simply emerged, it had detonated, sending shockwaves through every relationship, every unspoken promise, every fragile boundary. And as the silence stretched into the darkest hours, each of them confronted a terrifying reality. The choices they made next would determine not only the fate of their relationships but the very person they would become in the aftermath.